Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is not much fun, but we so need to talk about it. Toxic people in the workplace. How do we manage them? It is one thing that causes our managers, who I spend a lot of time training, coaching, how do we actually help them manage some toxic people in the workplace? Toxicity is not just about difficult people, right? So one thing is we go, what's the difference between toxic people and difficult people? Toxic people are the ones that drain our energy. They actually have an impact on reducing our productivity. So one is we see this difficult behavior over here, but when we actually look at toxic people, they actually then actively contribute to creating a negative culture. Hi, everybody. My name is Shivani Gupta. I am your host of the Passion Institute podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that is not much fun, but we so need to talk about it. Toxic people in the workplace. How do we manage them? It is one thing that causes our managers, who I spend a lot of time training, coaching, how do we actually help them manage some toxic people in the workplace? So let's just define what we're speaking about here. Toxicity is not just about difficult people, right? So one thing is we go, what's the difference between toxic people and difficult people? Toxic people are the ones that drain our energy. They actually have an impact on reducing our productivity. So one is we see this difficult behavior over here, but when we actually look at toxic people, they actually then actively contribute to creating a negative culture. And one of the things that studies and research is showing is that that's the part that leads to high turnover, low morale, even financial losses as a result of all those things directly, but also indirectly. So in this episode, what I want to do is I want to kind of break down how do you identify toxic people, how do you manage them, and what you want to obviously try and do is create a passionate, driven culture. So let's talk about some statistics and why we want to be able to do that. Just in the US alone, toxic workplaces are costing $223 billion in turnover costs over the 5 years, according to a number of different research papers that have been around. And toxic people can be anywhere. They're not people down here. Sometimes they're our peers. Sometimes they're our bosses. And obviously, sometimes they're the people that work for us. They kill passion. They kill productivity, and they absolutely kill innovation. What we want to do is, we want to kind of work out how do we spot it and how do we apply that passion model to be able to manage them. So as I said earlier, toxic people aren't just difficult, right? They actively harm the workplace culture. And so the different types of people that we get are the manipulator. So people that really manipulate, they, backstab you. They might, they have their own agenda in terms of what they want to be able to make that work. Then we get the energy vampires, and you might have heard that. They're the ones that are constantly negative. They're always the victim. Something's always happened to them compared to the rest of the world, and they kind of suck the energy out of you, but also sometimes out of a whole room. And we see those people in the workplace. We also get what I call the credit stealer, people that take other people's work and they go, this is an idea I had, even though you might have helped them generate it. This recently happened to me. I actually helped an author generate a name for her book. I saw her do all the PR, even talk to some of the people in a room where I was in the room. No, hey, thanks, Shivani, for helping me brainstorm it. I gave her that name. Anyway, so just the credit stealer in terms of what actually occurs. Then we get the micromanager. How is that micromanager a toxic person? They're just very detailed. Well, what they do is that they create stress for people because people don't feel empowered. They feel that they're constantly being judged and constantly being micromanaged. And so sometimes that can lead to bullying, but absolutely what it does is reduced trust in the business. And then we get the downright workplace bully. And these are the people that really thrive on intimidation. They've got that aggressive behavior or passive aggressive behavior, and we see that. Harvard Business School talks about the fact that avoiding a toxic worker is twice as beneficial as hiring a star performer. Let me repeat that. When I read that, I was like, my mind was blown. Avoiding a toxic worker is twice as beneficial as hiring a star performer. Avoid hiring and manage the toxic people in your workplace because they have such a big thing. So how do we actually, create more passion in terms of what we're trying to do? Well, with toxic people, we want to have proactive boundaries. We want to be aware of what they're actually doing in some of their behaviors. We want to make sure that all of our communication is very strategic, direct, non-emotional. We also want to be able to create a support network from them. We want to lean in on leadership and HR and mentors if we need to be, and we want to be able to influence their positivity because we want to shift the conversations we have. We want them to take ownership of their reactions and not other people's, and we want the non-engagement. We want to avoid feeding the drama when we need to be able to do that. The study from Stanford talks about the fact that that toxic environments can be harmful as actually being in a smoking environment. We know how bad that is. I love the Netflix CEO, Reed Hastings. They've got a policy that says no brilliant jerks because toxic people cost more than they contribute. The other one, and I'm going to swear for a moment, that I've seen a couple of sporting teams have, they have a no dickhead policy. So they say, if you're a dickhead, we don't want you here at all. And the other thing is toxic people have a psychological impact on teams as well because they increase stress and absenteeism and burnout. And particularly if they're people that are leaders that we're working for that are toxic, there's a Journal of Applied Psychology just talks about the ripple effect people like that can have as well. And psychological safety is a really, really big thing in our workplaces these days. And toxic people either influence or they can actually, completely destroy that as well. How can leaders reduce some of that toxicity? Well, one thing is to have a zero tolerance policy. One of the things you say is, we're going to be very, very strict in terms of workplace bullying. I remember my son being at a particular school where he was getting bullied a bit, particularly racial bullying, which was absolutely disgusting and very hurtful for him. I copped it when I moved to Australia. I sort of justified in my head it was because I had just moved to Australia at the age of 11 and my English still had this heavy Indian accent. He doesn't have that and he's still got it. And that first school did nothing. And so they just didn't have policies on it. When I asked them about their bullying policies, they didn't actually, they only had the physical bullying, but nothing around racial bullying. The second school that he's gone to, they have a zero tolerance policy on it. So your workplace could actually have a zero tolerance policies around certain things. The other thing is we need to train our managers. I'm so big on making sure that our managers are trained to know how to coach people, including spotting as well as then addressing the toxic behaviours that might be happening before that one apple spoils the car. We also need to empower our employees to speak up without fear. So if they're having some issues and challenges, that they feel safe enough to be able to, do that. The other part is how do we actually handle toxic bosses? So one of the things is, look, I'm calling out some of that behaviour professionally. And one way you could do that is to say, hey, I noticed that feedback wasn't constructive. How can I make that a bit more, how could you make that a bit more solution oriented so that I can actually really do something about it? The other part that is really hard, and I still get triggered from it, is how to not let toxic people trigger you. So what couple of things that you say to yourself when you come around them, you almost kind of put yourself into this is going to be expected. I'm not going to take this on. This is not about me. And I often, the other strategy that I have is to be able to seek allies because toxic people lose power when they're a little bit more isolated. They thrive on having other people around where they can pass that. And you want to leverage your human resources or your HR people, when that's there. How do you detox a workplace that's had, toxicity, but how do you reignite that passion in a team or in a workplace that's happened? Well, culture always starts at the top. We've got to have leaders that have got to model that trust and accountability. We've got to have regular feedback loops. And again, we are really big at the Passion Institute talking about the importance of feedback loops constantly. And you want to encourage that openness because toxicity thrives, grows when there's silence. When there's transparency, it can then cure that. And how do we replace toxicity with a passion-driven workplace? Well, we want to have that growth and that purpose and passion, and we want to be able to talk about that. We want to create high, psychological, safe organizations that really help us to be able to do that. So, as a couple of takeaways, toxicity is a choice, and so is passion, right? We can really create as leaders in our businesses that every team's got challenges. I haven't come across any team in my 30 plus years of corporate, working with my businesses, working with over 150 companies. Every team's got some challenges, even a team of two. There's always some sort of challenges. But passionate workplaces, they don't to let the toxicity cloud it and take over. I'd also love for you, as you're listening to this, watching this, to be able to maybe identify a toxic workplace that you've got in your team or with a particular individual and work out what action you are going to take. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you continue to create passionate people, passionate cultures, and please let us know if you've got any questions or if you could take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Passion Institute podcast. If today's episode sparked a new idea or inspired you to maybe take some action or helped you see a business in a new light, we would love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe. It really helps us present a great show. Leave a review and share this episode with other fellow entrepreneurs and leaders who also are ready to make an impact. Remember, passion is the fuel for greatness, and every step you take brings you closer to your vision. Keep dreaming big, leading with purpose, and making waves in the world. Until next time, stay passionate, stay inspired, and keep building your legacy. This is your host, Shivani, and signing on from the Passion Institute podcast. See you soon.